Why did she choose a town like this, a place most people only found if they were looking to disappear? That was the first question, though no one in Coyote Springs dared to ask it out loud. They saw her behind the bar, sleeves rolled up, shoulders squared, moving with quiet efficiency, and they sensed there was more to Morgan Cole than a bartender. But they didn't press. People in small desert towns respected silence. They had their own ghosts. Morgan carried more than most. The Arizona sun hammered down on her as she unloaded crates of beer from the back of her truck, sweat soaking into her shirt, but she welcomed the strain. Physical pain was manageable. It was honest. It didn't creep up at night like the memories. 4 years removed from active duty, and still her body moved with the reflexive precision the Navy SEALs had drilled into her. She had left that world behind, or so she told herself, but the truth was that war never really let her go. The saloon door resisted the key as it always did, the old lock catching halfway. Morgan jiggled it free, eyes sweeping the lot behind her, scanning exits, cataloging every detail. A man shouldn't have been able to tell she had once been trained to spot ambushes and threats, but her habits betrayed her. Even in a town that seemed dead by noon, she checked. Always checked. Inside, the Mirage Saloon offered shadows and whiskey-stained wood. A refuge. A distraction. Not much to outsiders, but it was hers. Her own corner of the world, where the nightmares could be drowned out by the clinking of glasses and the murmur of voices. She had 3 hours before opening. Enough time to stock shelves, polish glasses, and remind herself why she'd chosen this exile. But when she glanced at the calendar on the wall, her pulse faltered. September 17th. 4 years to the day. The mission that had burned itself into her bones, that had taken everyone but her. She gripped the bar, knuckles blanching white. She still heard his voice sometimes, the last desperate transmission before static swallowed it whole. "Morgan, we're pinned down, we need." Then silence. 6 went in. 1 came out, and the survivor was left with guilt heavier than body armor. The glass in her hand shattered. Blood welled from the cut, but she barely felt it. She cleaned up mechanically, bandaging the wound with the same detached focus she had used to patch bullet holes in herself overseas. Pain was easy. It was the remembering that crushed her. By the time she flipped the neon sign to open, her face was a mask again. Calm, unreadable. Customers drifted in, old Jeff with his whiskey, the brothers at the pool table, a couple truckers passing through. Morgan moved among them silently, pouring drinks, avoiding questions. It was almost enough to make her believe she could stay invisible. Until walked in. Carried the kind of warmth that Morgan found almost alien. A owner with soft eyes and a tired smile that refused to give up, even when life pressed hard. She ordered only club soda as always. They weren't friends exactly, but there was a bond there, built on quiet understanding. "How's Morgan?" asked, setting the glass down. Brightened at the mention of her daughter, then dimmed just as quickly. "She's fine, smarter than me half the time, but business." Her voice trailed. Then she leaned closer. "Some new men in town, bikers. They came into the yesterday, made a mess, scared off my regulars, said they'd be back." Morgan stilled. "They threaten you?" "Not directly, but the way the leader looked at me, like it was just a matter of time." Morgan's jaw tightened. She didn't need details. She knew the type, predators who thrived on fear. She advised caution, but when left, Morgan couldn't shake the surge of protectiveness. She had sworn never to feel that again. Not after Afghanistan. Not after failing Reed, Maria, Wolf, Miller, all of them. Yet trembling hands haunted her long after the owner was gone. 2 nights later, Morgan heard them before she saw them. Motorcycles growled through the desert silence, circling like wolves. 5 of them rolled under the Mirage's neon glow, their leather vests emblazoned with a coiled viper. The air shifted as soon as they entered. Pool cues stilled mid-shot. Conversations died. Even old Jeff hunched deeper into his drink. Their leader moved first, tall, lean, with pale eyes that saw too much. He carried himself like a man who'd fought before, who'd killed before, and didn't lose sleep over it. His name, he said, was Vince. Whiskey for him and his brothers. Morgan poured without flinching, but inside her chest a familiar alarm rang. These men weren't drifters looking for trouble. They moved like operators, disciplined, tactical, the way a fire team flowed into hostile ground. Vince studied her. He probed with words, subtle jabs meant to draw out her story. He talked about protection, about accidents that could happen. He left her too much money on the bar, a down payment, he called it, on their relationship. Morgan didn't bite. She met his threats with silence, her face unreadable, though her hand hovered near the cig locked away upstairs. Vince only smiled, but his eyes promised this wasn't finished. When they left, the bar exhaled. Morgan locked the doors early, retreating to her apartment above, but sleep betrayed her. The nightmares came again, the ambush, the explosion, his voice begging through static. She woke drenched in sweat, gasping for air, as though she'd been dragged back to the mountains of Afghanistan. Dawn broke. Gold light spilled across the desert. She dressed mechanically, tried to shake off the shadows, but the weight never lifted. At that morning, the bell above the door rang cheerlessly. Only 2 tables were occupied. Smile was brittle, her shoulders tense. She admitted the bikers had returned. They sat for hours, barely speaking, just watching. They left behind another oversized tip, 100 for a $20 bill. Protection money disguised as generosity. Morgan's gut twisted. This wasn't random. These men had purpose, discipline, and a method. They were digging in. Where was Morgan asked, sharper than she intended. Safe with my sister in Phoenix, tried to smile, but her voice broke. I'm scared, Morgan, they're not leaving. Morgan could only say, call me if they come back. She didn't explain why. She didn't explain that she had once lived in the company of men like Vince, that she had studied their eyes, their tactics, their silences. She didn't explain that she could already see the shape of what was coming. Back at the Mirage, Morgan spotted him, a single rider leaning against his bike, watching the bar with patient arrogance. One of Vince's men. Hammer, she remembered. He tipped an imaginary hat before roaring away. The message was clear. They were watching. Upstairs, Morgan opened the safe she had sworn never to touch. Inside lay the ghosts of her past, the cig that had never failed her, a combat knife etched with an eagle, a satellite phone she hadn't used in years, and a sealed envelope of classified documents she wasn't supposed to have. Reports, plans, death certificates, proof of the lives lost under her command. She spread them out on the desk. Reed Harper's Texas grin, Maria's steady gaze, Wolf's sniper calm, his brown eyes serious but kind, faces of the dead, faces she had failed. And a new face intruded, the one from last night. Vince, leader of the Desert Vipers, trained, disciplined, calculating. His gaze had lingered on her like recognition. Something wasn't right. She returned the documents to the safe, but not the weapon. The pistol slid into the waistband of her jeans, the weight familiar, almost comforting. If the Desert Vipers thought Coyote Springs was theirs to devour, they had underestimated the bartender behind the Mirage counter. Morgan Cole might have buried her past, but she hadn't forgotten how to fight. And this time she swore she would not fail. Why was her name on his lips? That was the first question that tore through Morgan's mind when Vince leaned across the table and said it aloud. Not bartender, not sweetheart. Her name, her full name. Morgan Cole. He said it like he already knew her, like he'd known her long before the Mirage. And that chilled her more than the threat of his men's weapons ever could. The night had unraveled fast. The Desert Vipers had filled the bar, drinking slow, moving loud, pushing the walls of the Mirage with their presence. Vince had made his demand plain, 15% of her revenue, protection in return. He called it an arrangement. She called it what it was, extortion. She told him no, calm, unshaken. But her calm only amused him. He leaned in close, his pale eyes searching hers. He said her name, then left her with a laugh that carried no humor. He and his men roared into the night, leaving silence heavy as lead behind them. Morgan stood still after they left, her pulse refusing to settle. She hadn't introduced herself that way in Coyote Springs. No one here called her Cole. She had been just Morgan, just the bartender. Which meant Vince had done his homework, or worse. She began cleaning the table when she spotted it, a photograph left behind. A small square of glossy paper, worn at the edges. Vince with another man in desert camouflage, both grinning, both alive in that frozen moment. Her stomach dropped. Reed Harper. Her teammate, her brother in arms. The Texan who'd carried a drawl even in firefights, who had shared MREs with Afghan kids, who had played guitar under desert stars when the war allowed a sliver of peace. Reed, who had died in Afghanistan 4 years ago, or so she had believed. Her hands shook as she turned the photo over. On the back, faded ink, Kandahar 2018, months before the ambush. It wasn't possible. Reed had died. She had seen the crater, the twisted metal, the fragments collected and labeled as him. She had read his death certificate, signed by military authority. And yet here he was, alive in a photo, standing beside the man who had just threatened her. The bar tilted beneath her feet. Sleep abandoned her. She paced through the night, the photograph on the table like a taunt. If Reed had survived, why hadn't he come back? If he hadn't survived, why was Vince carrying proof they'd been close? Questions swarmed, no answers in reach. By dawn, she knew she couldn't solve it alone. She drove east, 40 miles to Junction, where the county sheriff's department sat squat and unremarkable under the desert sun. She hated the idea of asking for help, but there was one man here who knew her past. Reeves. She hadn't seen him since Germany, the hospital where she'd lain broken, patched together with staples and morphine. Had been there then, part of the rescue unit that dragged her back from death. He arranged her discharge, her benefits. Later, she learned he'd traded his uniform for a sheriff's badge. Now she needed him. The deputy at the desk looked her over with curiosity, maybe interest. Morgan kept her expression unreadable. She asked for Reeves and waited in the stale hum of the office. When walked in, he looked almost unchanged. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair salt and pepper now, face weathered but steady. For a heartbeat, his eyes betrayed surprise at seeing her. Then his voice settled low, measured. "Morgan Cole, been a while." Her reply was flat, "We need to talk." In his office, the smell of gun oil and coffee heavy in the air, she laid the photograph on his desk. Vince with Reed Harper. Studied it for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "Where'd you get this?" "Dropped in my bar last night." "And now he's in Coyote Springs." Morgan nodded. "With his gang. They call themselves the Desert Vipers. They want control, and they know me." Leaned back, sighing. "They're not a gang, not in the way people think. Former military, mercs, private security they've organized. Weapons, drugs, extortion across state lines. We've had our eye on them for years," and his voice dipped lower. "Vincent's ex-Army Ranger, contractor, worked in Afghanistan, Iraq. No convictions, too careful, too connected." Morgan's throat tightened, and Reed, his body was recovered. His eyes flickered. Was it? Something in his tone made her pause. "Officially," he went on, "Reed Harper died in that ambush. But if had ties to him before, if he has a photo, it means something. And you, Morgan, you can't be blind to the danger. These aren't barroom thugs. They're trained killers." Morgan met his gaze evenly. "So am I." He almost smiled, but only almost. Back in Coyote Springs, the smoke rose before she reached the town. A black smear against the clean blue sky. Her gut knew before her eyes confirmed. Copper Canyon coffee. Flames had gutted it, the roof caved in, windows shattered. Volunteers fought the blaze with hoses, but the building was lost. On the curb sat wrapped in a blanket, her face streaked with soot and tears. "They burned it," she whispered when Morgan knelt beside her. "3 of them. Said it was a demonstration. that this could happen to anyone who didn't pay. Rage lanced through Morgan white-hot. Did they hurt you? Shook her head. They made sure I got out. They wanted me to watch. Morgan helped her to her feet. You're staying with me tonight. His voice broke. She can't see this. She won't, Morgan promised. She stays in Phoenix until this is over. But as she guided into the truck, Morgan's mind shifted into combat rhythm. The Vipers had escalated. Threats to fire, fire to terror. This wasn't intimidation anymore. It was war. That night when finally slept on Morgan's couch, Morgan sat in the dark, phone in hand. She scrolled to a number she had buried years ago. The line clicked. Yeah, the voice was gruff, familiar. Free, she hesitated on the old call sign. It's Morgan Cole. The pause stretched long. Then, holy hell, is that really you? I need your help. Morgan Cole never asked for help. The words felt foreign, heavy, but she forced them out. There's a group here, she said. Desert Vipers, former military turned bikers. Their leader had a photograph with Reed. Kandahar 2018. On the line went still. His voice changed, harder. I'll be there tomorrow. Morgan closed her eyes. Relief and dread mixed. Had been a brother once, a teammate. But his urgency told her what she already feared. This ran deeper than a bar fight in a desert town. The past was clawing its way back. By morning, she was waiting at the Mirage whence Jeep rolled into town. Dust caked, engine rumbling. He stepped out like no time had passed, still moving with predatory grace, though streaks of gray threaded his dark hair. For a moment, neither spoke. Survivors, two people who had seen too much. Then broke the silence. Morgan Cole, bartender, who'd have thought? Not me. They didn't embrace. They never had, but his hand on her shoulder was enough. Inside, over whiskey poured too early, she showed him the photograph. Vince and Reed. His face hardened. There's something you should know about that mission. Morgan's heart lurched. What about it? The official report, he said slowly, was a lie. Your team wasn't the victim of bad intel. You were betrayed. The word hit like shrapnel. By who? I've been asking that for 4 years. He drank, his hand unsteady. Someone sold your mission plan, routes, timeline, extraction. It wasn't chance, it was a setup. And Reed, his voice darkened. Reed's body was never recovered. Morgan went still. You're saying? I'm saying there's a possibility Reed didn't die in that blast. And if he did, leaned in, eyes sharp, then maybe he was the one who sold you out. The room swayed. Reed, her friend, her teammate, the man who had saved her life more than once, a traitor. No, she said, too fast, too sure. Reed wouldn't. His voice was steady, merciless. I don't want to believe it either, but the evidence lines up. His body wasn't confirmed. He had contacts, and now. Morgan shot to her feet, packing her chest tight. Why would he betray us? Why would he betray? Money, ideology, coercion, listed them all, his voice like gravel. Morgan couldn't breathe. The photograph lay between them, Vince's cold eyes staring back. If Reed had lived, if he had turned, then the truth was worse than death. Why had the message come to her phone and not to anyone else? That was the question burning in Morgan's mind when she read the text. I know who you are, Morgan Cole. SEAL Team 6. Afghanistan 2019. We need to talk. Tonight, 2200 hours. Old Mining Road east of town. Come alone. Her pulse ticked faster with every word. Whoever had sent it knew too much. Details she had kept buried. Pieces of a life she never discussed in Coyote Springs. The warning was clear. This wasn't some random bluff. Across from her read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. It's a trap, he said immediately. Probably, Morgan agreed. Her voice was steady, but something beneath it trembled. The text wasn't just a threat, it was a lifeline dangled in the dark, a chance at answers. But I'm going. Not alone. You'll be my overwatch, she said, Like old times. His grim smile was all the answer she needed. By nightfall, the desert wrapped itself in silence, broken only by the buzz of insects and the low whisper of wind through cactus spines. Morgan parked her truck at the turnoff, headlights off, stars glittering overhead. The quarter moon cast a faint glow, enough to shape the silhouettes of rocks and scrub. In position, his voice crackled softly in her earpiece. He was set up on a ridge, sniper rifle trained on the clearing where the meeting would take place. Morgan checked her cig, slid it back into her waistband. She felt the knife strapped to her ankle, the small flashlight in her pocket. Her body remembered the drill even when her mind wanted to fray. The hum of an engine broke the night. A black SUV approached slowly, its headlights sweeping the mining road. It stopped 50 yards out, idling, lights glaring into her eyes. Classic tactic: blind the target, control the field. Morgan stood her ground, every nerve taut. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, cautious, movements too careful to be reckless. "Morgan Cole," a voice called across the distance. "Depends who's asking." The figure moved out of the beam of the headlights and Morgan's breath caught. Not Vince, not Reed. Dr. Maya, the town's quiet physician. Morgan blinked, disbelief tangling with suspicion. What the hell is this? Maya removed the cap from her head, dark hair falling loose. "I'm sorry for the disguise. The Vipers watch everything. I couldn't risk being followed." Morgan didn't lower her guard. "Why contact me like this? Why not knock on my door?" "Because I know who you are," Maya said softly. "And I know what happened in Afghanistan. I was there, Morgan, at the forward operating base. I treated you when they brought you in. I saw the reports. I saw the cover-up." Morgan's pulse hammered. She searched the woman's eyes for deception, for some crack that would give her away. But Maya only looked tired, haunted. Through her earpiece, voice pressed urgently. "Morgan, what's happening? Who is that?" Morgan ignored him for the moment. "If you know so much," she said coldly, "then tell me something no one else would." Maya's gaze didn't falter. "When you came in, half-conscious, torn apart by shrapnel, you kept saying one thing, over and over. They knew. They knew we were coming. Even under sedation, you couldn't stop repeating it." Morgan went rigid. A memory flickered, disjointed, hazy but real. The words on her lips, muttered through the morphine fog. Words the official report had dismissed as trauma-induced paranoia. Maya stepped closer. "You weren't wrong, they did know. Someone betrayed your team." The desert seemed to tilt around her. Morgan drew a slow breath. "Talk." Maya glanced back at the SUV, then at Morgan again. "Not here, it's not safe." "You lured me out here with a text. You're going to tell me something." The doctor hesitated, then dropped it like a stone into the silence. "Reed Harper isn't dead." Morgan's breath caught. "I don't have proof he's alive," Maya continued quickly. "But I saw the records. The DNA tests on the remains didn't match. They pushed them through anyway. They wanted him officially declared dead." "Why?" "That's the question," Maya said. Her voice trembled. "But I think Reed knew something. Something he wasn't supposed to, and someone covered it up." Morgan's chest ached. Hope warred with fury. If Reed had survived, why hadn't he come back? Why had she buried him in her heart for 4 years while he walked free? Before she could ask, his voice snapped into her ear, sharp with warning. "Morgan, we've got company. Multiple vehicles, south approach. 3, maybe 4. Headlights flickered on the horizon, bouncing over the desert terrain. "They followed me," Maya whispered, panic flashing across her face. "Move," Morgan ordered. She grabbed the doctor's arm, dragging her toward the truck. Gravel spat under her boots as she shoved Maya into the passenger seat and started the engine. "Fall back to secondary," she said into the earpiece. "I've got the dock, we're pulling out." "Copy, I'll circle north." Morgan slammed the truck into gear, wheels spitting dust as she took a narrow side trail. The SUV engines roared behind them, gaining fast. Bullets sparked off rocks near the road, chasing them through the night. Morgan drove hard, muscles remembering every convoy, every desert pursuit. She swerved off the trail into rough terrain, the truck bucking over ridges. Maya clutched the dashboard, pale. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Morgan said, eyes locked ahead. That somewhere was an old hunting cabin, abandoned years ago, tucked into a canyon 15 miles from town. Morgan had found it on one of her solitary hikes, stocked it with supplies, just in case she ever needed to vanish. Tonight, she needed it. She parked the truck in a depression behind the cabin, out of sight from aerial view. The night pressed quiet again, broken only by their ragged breathing. Inside, the cabin was bare bones, cot, table, stove, but it would hold. A text came through her phone. "Lost the tail, ETA 45. Morgan turned to Maya. "Start from the beginning." The doctor sat heavily, exhaustion written in the lines of her face. "After the ambush, I noticed things. Files that disappeared, reports redacted, DNA results that didn't add up. When I asked questions, I was transferred out early. My career ended. Someone wanted me silent." And Reed. His identification was the weakest of them all. The DNA was only a 62% match, not enough. But they pushed it through anyway, declared him dead. I think he was taken alive." Morgan's stomach clenched. "Captured. Maybe coerced, maybe turned." The word stung, echoing's grim theory. The door creaked. Stepped inside, rifle case slung over his shoulder. He scanned the room, then dropped into a chair, eyes fixed on Maya. "You're saying Reed Harper survived?" "I'm saying the evidence was manipulated," Maya said, "and someone wanted the truth buried." They argued into the night, over Reed, over betrayal, over possibilities too dark to name. But one truth stood clear in Morgan's mind. Whatever had happened in Afghanistan, whatever had brought Vince and the Desert Vipers to Coyote Springs, it was no coincidence. This was connected. Reed was the thread. And Morgan would pull until the whole thing unraveled, even if it killed her. Why did the files vanish so cleanly, as if someone had swept away every trace of the truth? That question burned in Morgan's mind as slid his laptop across the rickety cabin table. The glow of the screen cut through the dark, casting their faces in pale light. Maya leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly as she directed him. "Start with the medical examiner's reports, the ones I pulled before they disappeared from the system." Morgan stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes locked on the screen but her thoughts miles away. Her pulse hadn't slowed since the SUV chase, since Maya's claim that Reed Harper might not have died in that Afghan valley. The files opened, pages of cold clinical text, DNA percentages, fragmentary remains. Morgan scanned them, her training letting her parse what others might miss. 5 identifications came back nearly absolute, over 98% certainty. But Reed? 62%. Not enough for confirmation, yet the final report stamped, confirmed KIA. Morgan's jaw clenched. Someone overrode this. "Exactly," Maya said, "and when I asked questions I was told the evidence was sufficient. Then, 2 days later, I was shipped home." His eyes narrowed. He flipped to another file, comm logs from the day of the ambush. His fingers froze on the keyboard. "Wait, look at this." Morgan leaned closer. Transcripts scrolled across the screen, her team's desperate calls for backup. She'd heard them before, memorized the words that had haunted her nightmares. But there was one entry she had never seen. 9:43 hours. Harper Bravo Actual, Echo 6 were compromised. Someone sold us out. Do not send. The line cut there. Labeled transmission interrupted. Morgan's breath caught. Her chest tightened until she couldn't speak. Reed, his voice, not betraying them but warning them, muttered a curse under his breath. If this is real, he wasn't the traitor. He was trying to expose the traitor. Maya's voice lowered, and someone made sure his warning never reached the right ears. Morgan staggered back from the table, her legs weak. For 4 years she had carried guilt heavy as stone, thinking she had missed something, failed somehow. For weeks now she had let suspicions gnaw at her, that Reed might have sold them out. But this was worse. He had tried to save them, and they silenced him for it. The room spun. She braced against the wall, staring at the floorboards until they steadied. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, dangerous. Who buried this? Clicked through more files, transfers, reassignments, reports that ended abruptly mid-sentence. One name stood out again and again. Reeves. Morgan's stomach twisted. She remembered his eyes across the sheriff's desk earlier that week, the way he had spoken carefully, weighing every word. The way he had known about feelings she'd never confessed aloud. Had that been kindness or calculation? Looked up at her. He was intelligence liaison, present at the base before the mission, present during recovery. He had access to everything. Maya's voice was careful. It doesn't mean he was the leak, but he was in position to protect whoever was. Morgan's head throbbed. The world tilted again. Had been one of the few people she allowed into her life after Afghanistan. One of the few she trusted, if he had been part of it. Her phone buzzed, a new message. From Reeves. We need to talk. Urgent, I'm coming to the Mirage, 1 hour. Morgan's pulse surged. It couldn't be coincidence. She showed it too. His expression darkened immediately. Could be a trap. Or the truth, Morgan said. Her voice was hoarse. Either way, I need to know. Shook his head. If he's dirty, you walking into a room with him is suicide. I won't be walking in blind, Morgan replied. You stay hidden, back up if it goes south. Her hand brushed the grip of her pistol. The weight grounded her, steadied her. By the time she returned to the Mirage, the sun was burning high, the town moving in its slow rhythm. She found at the bar, clutching a cup of coffee with shaky hands. You should stay somewhere else tonight, Morgan told her gently. Frowned. This is about the bikers again, isn't it? Morgan didn't answer. Silence was enough. Sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. I'll go to's. She offered me her spare room. Good, Morgan forced a faint smile. Safer there. When left, Morgan locked the doors, drew the shades, and prepared. She laid out the files on the desk in her office. She checked the pistol beneath the bar. She rehearsed in her mind every angle, every possibility. At precisely the hour, dusk clouded the lot outside. A sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop. Reeves stepped out, uniform crisp, eyes shadowed with tension. He removed his hat as he entered, closing the door behind him. Morgan, his voice was level, almost weary. Thanks for seeing me. Didn't seem like I had a choice, she said, her tone flat. He studied her, then the room, then sat at the bar. His movements were cautious but not defensive. He didn't reach for his weapon. Not yet. They're more dangerous than you realize, he began. The Desert Vipers, she asked, her voice cool. He nodded. They're not just an outlaw gang. They're assets. Her eyes narrowed. Assets for who? That's the question. He rubbed a hand over his cropped hair. They take contracts, some from governments, some not. They do the dirty work no one wants traced. And why are they here? His gaze locked on hers. Because you're here, and because of what happened in Afghanistan. Her chest tightened. Say it. His voice dropped. Your team wasn't wiped out by bad intel. They were targeted. Someone wanted them gone, wanted you gone. The air between them thickened. Morgan forced her voice steady. And you expect me to believe you weren't part of that? Hurt flickered in his eyes. I wasn't the leak, but I saw the cover-up. I've been watching ever since. Morgan reached beneath the bar, pulled out the laptop and slid it across to him. We've seen the files, the comm logs, Reed's last transmission. He warned you. He said we were compromised. His eyes widened. For the first time, genuine shock cracked his mask. You've seen those. Don't play dumb, her voice sharpened. If Reed was alive past 9:43, then he wasn't the traitor. So why was he declared dead? Why was evidence buried? Stared at the screen, then back at her. His voice was low, rough. Because if Reed was alive, he was the key to exposing who ordered the ambush. And that's the one thing they couldn't allow. Morgan's heart hammered. Who? I don't know. His jaw tightened. But it wasn't just one man. It was bigger, higher. Your mission wasn't about a weapons cache. That was the cover. You were sent to eliminate a high-value target. Someone powerful didn't want that target touched. Morgan's breath shook. She had suspected for years that the story didn't add up, but hearing it confirmed, it was like the ground had shifted under her. Why tell me this now? Because the Viper's burnings was only the start. They're here for something bigger, and it's connected to you. Morgan's hand hovered near her pistol unseen. Her eyes narrowed. And what exactly is your role in all this, protector or executioner? Silence stretched. He held her gaze, pain flickering across his face. Finally, he whispered, I was trying to keep you alive. Morgan's pulse thundered in her ears. Alive for what? She didn't ask it aloud, not yet. The answers were coming, but she wasn't sure she wanted to hear them. Why hadn't she pulled the trigger? That question echoed in Morgan's mind long after Reeves walked out of the Mirage, leaving her in the dim glow of the bar lights, her pistol still untouched beneath the counter. She could have ended it right there. One squeeze and the questions would died with him, but something in his voice, the fracture when he said I was trying to keep you alive, had stayed her hand. Now she wasn't sure if it was mercy or a mistake. Upstairs was waiting in the shadows, rifle case at his side. He's lying, he said flatly as soon as Morgan told him what had revealed. Or at least bending the truth. Guys like him don't carry guilt. They carry orders. Morgan sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion settling into her bones. If he's lying, then why tell me anything at all? Shrugged, his eyes dark. Because lies and truth taste the same in the dark. He tells you just enough so you hesitate when the time comes. Morgan thought of Reed's voice again, that final clip transmission. They knew. Someone sold us out. Her jaw tightened. Reed didn't betray us, not a chance. Studied her carefully. You sound sure. I am sure. But under her conviction, a deeper ache gnawed at her, because certainty didn't bring Reed back. Certainty didn't erase the 4 years she had lived with his death carved into her. If he was alive, where had he been? And if he wasn't, why had Vince carried his photo like a trophy? The desert had no answers, only silence. By morning, the Mirage was alive with noise again. Truckers came in for breakfast whiskey, locals for coffee strong enough to numb their nerves. But the normal rhythm was broken. Too many eyes kept flicking to the door, waiting for the motorcycles. Too many conversations cut short when the rumble of engines passed outside. Returned late in the afternoon, her hair tied back, face pale but determined. She herself with cleaning glasses, restocking napkins, anything to keep her hands from shaking. I can't hide forever, she told Morgan. If I stay away, they win. Morgan didn't argue. She knew that kind of resolve, but she kept close, ready, every sense tuned to the door. The Vipers came at dusk. 7 of them this time, engines snarling, leather vests catching the last of the sunlight. Vince led them in, his smile sharp, his eyes colder than the desert night. He walked straight to the bar, his boots loud against the floorboards. You've been busy, he said, voice smooth. Meeting with old friends, digging through files. Morgan didn't flinch. You left something behind. She slid the photo across the bar. Vince picked it up, studied it, then tucked it back into his vest. You recognize him, don't you? His voice was a whisper now, low enough that only she heard. Reed Harper, he's not who you think he is. Her pulse stuttered. Then who is he? Vince only smiled, a predator savoring the moment. Ask him yourself. The room seemed to collapse around her. Before she could speak, Vince leaned closer, his breath acrid with whiskey. "We're hosting a little gathering tomorrow night. Abandoned quarry east of town. Be there, or more buildings burn." He straightened, signaled his men, and just like that, the Vipers filed out. The rumble of their engines lingered long after they were gone. Morgan gripped the bar until her knuckles whitened. A gathering, a quarry, and Vince's promise that Reed Harper would be there. His voice was low when he spoke from the corner booth. "It's bait." "I know." "Then why even consider going?" Morgan turned, eyes burning with a mix of dread and longing. "Because if there's even a chance Reed's alive, I have to see him. I need to know." Cursed under his breath. This isn't about need, it's about survival, and walking into that quarry is suicide. Morgan didn't answer, she couldn't, because even as he spoke, her heart was already racing ahead, imagining Reed's face after all these years. Alive, changed, maybe broken, maybe something worse, but alive. That night she barely slept. When she did, the dreams came back: sand, gunfire, voice, Reed's hand pulling her out of the blast. She woke with tears she didn't remember shedding. By noon the next day, she was on the road with. He drove, silent, his jaw set tight. In the back of the Jeep lay 2 rifles, a duffel of gear, and enough ammunition to remind them both of what they used to be. The quarry opened before them as the sun dipped low. A wide scar in the desert, jagged cliffs circling a basin where shadows gathered thick. Fires burned in rusted barrels, throwing flickering light across rows of bikes. Dozens of men moved below, armed, disciplined, not the sloppy chaos of street gangs but the precision of trained operators. Morgan's gut clenched. The Vipers were more than a gang, they were an army. At the center, Vince waited, and beside him, Morgan's breath froze. Reed Harper. Alive. His hair was longer, streaked with dust and gray. His beard was thick, his face older, worn by years. But his eyes, brown, steady, unforgettable, were the same. For a long moment Morgan couldn't breathe. Reed, her brother in arms, the man she had mourned, cursed, prayed for, standing alive at the heart of the enemy's den. He saw her. His gaze flickered recognition, shock, then something unreadable. Morgan whispered his name, Reed. His hand gripped her shoulder like iron. "Careful." Vince stepped forward, his grin widening. "Reunion night. Thought I'd bring family together." Morgan's voice was tight, raw. "What did you do to him?" Vince tilted his head. "What makes you think I did anything?" He gestured casually. "Ask him yourself." Reed's voice carried across the quarry, rougher than she remembered but clear. "Morgan." Her knees almost buckled. Hearing her name from his lips after all these years was a wound reopening. She stepped closer to the edge of the cliff, ignoring his hissed warning. "You're alive." Reed's expression was unreadable. "I am." "Then why?" Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you?" She choked on the words. His silence was an answer she didn't want. Finally he spoke, "Because I couldn't." The Vipers stirred restlessly around him, their eyes sharp, waiting. Vince's grin never faded. Morgan's heart pounded in her ears. "Tell me the truth, Reed. Were you with them all along? Did you sell us out?" The question hung in the air, a noose tightening. Reed's eyes met hers. Pain flickered there, but also steel. "I didn't betray you," he said, his voice cut clean. "But the man who did is closer than you think." The quarry erupted in noise, bikers shouting, engines revving, Vince laughing. Yanked her back, pulling her into the cover of the rocks as gunfire cracked the air. Bullets sparked around them, the reunion dissolving into chaos. Morgan ducked low, heart splitting between fury, relief, and the crushing storm of questions. Reed was alive, he hadn't betrayed her, but if he wasn't the traitor, then who was? Why hadn't he run to her? That was the thought clawing at Morgan as she tore through the desert night, the Jeep fishtailing on loose gravel, muzzle flashes still echoing in her mind. Reed had been there, alive, close enough she could see the lines in his face, hear the grit in his voice. And yet when the chaos broke, he hadn't moved toward her. He hadn't tried to escape. He had stayed with them. With the Vipers. His hands gripped the wheel, his jaw a slab of stone. You saw his eyes, he's one of them now. Morgan shook her head violently. No, no, that's not what I saw. What else do you call it? He stood shoulder to shoulder with Vince, surrounded by an army of killers. If he wasn't their man, he'd be dead. Morgan stared out into the blur of desert. Every heartbeat pounded with Reed's words, the weight of them heavier than any bullet. I didn't betray you. The man who did is closer than you think. Closer. The word gnawed at her. Closer than Vince, closer than the Vipers, closer than Reeves. Or had Reed meant something darker? By dawn, they reached the cabin again. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the ticking of the Jeep's engine. Morgan stepped out first, her legs unsteady, her throat dry. Maya was waiting inside. She sprang up when they entered, her eyes wide. What happened? I heard gunfire from the east, half the town's buzzing. Morgan didn't answer at first. She collapsed into a chair, hands trembling despite her control. Dropped the duffel on the table, his movements clipped, sharp, angry. Reed Harper's alive, he said flatly. Maya froze, alive. Morgan lifted her eyes. I saw him, he spoke to me, he said he didn't betray us. Maya sank slowly back down, her face pale, stunned. Then the DNA reports were more than manipulation, Morgan cut in. They were a burial, a cover to keep him erased, but he's here now, with. Silence stretched, broke it with a bitter laugh. And that means he's either compromised or he's been playing us from the start. Morgan shot him a glare, her voice razor-sharp. You didn't hear him, you didn't see him. I didn't need to, growled back. I saw enough. He's not chained, not gagged, not hiding. He's walking with them. That makes him one of them. Morgan slammed her fist into the table, rattling the glasses. No, Reed wouldn't. The outburst left her chest heaving. For a moment the room was only the sound of her ragged breath. Then, softly, Maya spoke. What if he's embedded? Morgan turned sharply. What? Maya's hands trembled as she clasped them in her lap. You said he told you he did betray you, that the traitor is closer than you think. What if he's with them because he has no choice? What if he's inside, trying to learn who's pulling their strings? The idea flickered, dangerous with hope. Morgan wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. But the years of silence, the sight of him among the Vipers. Her chest tightened. If that's true, then he's in more danger than any of us. Shook his head. Or he's stringing you along, using old loyalty to keep you from pulling the trigger. Morgan's throat ached. She looked between them, Maya clinging to fragile hope, hardened by suspicion, herself torn down the middle. The one thing she knew for certain, the quarry had changed everything. The Vipers weren't just circling Coyote Springs. They were staging something bigger, and Reed Harper was at the center of it. By midday, rumors swept through town like dust storms. The Vipers had taken over an old freight depot on the edge of Coyote Springs. They were stockpiling crates, moving in trucks under tarps, guards posted with military discipline. People whispered of weapons, drugs, worse. No one dared get close enough to confirm. Morgan decided she would. That night, dressed in desert camo she hadn't touched since her service days, Morgan moved through the scrub with at her side. The moon was low, the depot a dark shape ahead, its fence patched with rust, its warehouse glowing faintly with light. They slipped through a gap in the fence, hugging shadows. Voices echoed inside, low and rough. Morgan pressed herself against the corrugated wall, listening. Shipment leaves at dawn, one man said. Straight across the border, wants it tight, no mistakes. Cargo secure. Secured and sealed. Nobody opens it till it's delivered. Morgan's skin prickled. Cargo, secure, delivered. Too many words she'd heard before, always attached to something ugly. She motioned to cover the side door. Silently, she crept to a broken window, peered inside. Rows of crates, dozens, stenciled markings blurred by shadows but unmistakable in shape and number, weapons, military grade. And in the center of the warehouse, standing near Vince himself, was Reed. Morgan's breath caught again. He was leaning close to, speaking low, his expression unreadable. To anyone else it would look like loyalty, but Morgan watched the flicker of his eyes, the way his jaw clenched, the way his hand brushed once against his sleeve as though signaling. A signal only she would recognize. 3 taps paused, 2 taps. Their old code, I'm not free. Her heart leapt, then broke. He was alive, he was inside, but he wasn't safe. She ducked back, whispering harshly into her calm. He's signaling, he's not with them, he's trapped. Silence crackled, then his voice came low. Or he knows you're watching and he's playing you. Morgan's fists clenched. I know him. She pulled back, dragging air into her lungs, trying to think. Reed alive. Reed signaling. A shipment at dawn. The Vipers moving like an army. The truth was closing in, but so was the danger. They slipped back into the desert unseen. By the time they reached the jeep, Morgan's mind was already racing through possibilities. Maya was waiting at the cabin again, packing, her eyes snapping up when they entered. Well, Morgan told her about the crates, about Reed's signal, about Dawn. Maya's face went pale. If they're moving weapons across the border, it won't stop at smuggling. This is organized, funded. By who? Demanded. Maya's voice dropped. By whoever ordered your mission silenced in Afghanistan. The words struck hard. Morgan's breath stilled. The threads were tightening, past and present weaving into one. She stared out the cabin window into the vast, dark desert. 4 years ago, her team had been sacrificed to protect someone's secret. Now, the same players were moving again, using the Vipers as their hammer. And Reed Harper, alive, broken, caught between them all. Morgan's voice was quiet but unshakable. Then we stopped them, tonight. Did dawn always feel like judgment? Morgan asked herself that as the horizon bruised with light, the desert air chilled before the sun's burn returned. She hadn't slept. None of them had. The cabin was a grave of whispers and restless packing, the silence between them louder than any words. The shipment was moving this morning. She could feel it in her bones. The Vipers weren't subtle, but they weren't sloppy either. They operated with precision, as if trained by something bigger than outlaws with bikes. And Reed, her Reed, was in the middle of it. She stood outside the cabin, boots crunching dirt, watching the sunrise bleed over the canyon. Joined her, rifle slung, his face carved from shadow. "You sure about this?" he asked. Morgan didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed the light creeping across the desert floor, the way it burned away the night. She thought of Reed's code, the taps on his sleeve. I'm not free. Yes, she said finally. We can't let that convoy leave. Whatever in those crates, it's not meant for border gangs. It's meant to disappear. And if it disappears, we'll never trace it back to the people who ordered the ambush. Studied her carefully. And if Reed stands in your way. Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard. Then I'll deal with that when I see him. Inside, Maya laid maps across the table, her hands shaking slightly as she spread them flat. The freight depot has one main exit. The trucks will have to take Highway 14 east before they can branch off. If you hit them at the overpass, you'll bottleneck them. Morgan traced the route with her finger. Ambush the ambush. Take out the lead vehicle, force them into the canyon, then control the high ground. Classic play, muttered. But once bullets fly, we're outnumbered 10-1. Not if we're precise, Morgan said. Her voice steadied, soldier calm now. We don't have to wipe them all out. We just need the convoy stopped, the cargo revealed, and Reed pulled clear. Maya's voice cracked. What if he doesn't want to be pulled clear? Morgan froze. That thought cut deeper than any bullet. She shoved it aside before it could root. He will. An hour later, they were in position. The overpass loomed across the desert road, concrete cracked and sun-bleached but sturdy enough. Morgan lay prone on the ridge above, rifle steady, scope aligned. Was 50 yards west, his vantage covering the canyon mouth. Maya remained back at the jeep, comms headset trembling in her hands. Dust rose on the horizon, engines, the convoy. Morgan's breath slowed. The first truck emerged, matte black, reinforced, tires built for rough terrain. Two more followed, then a line of bikes. The Vipers rode tight, disciplined, nothing casual in their formation. Through her scope, Morgan scanned the lead truck, and her heart jolted. Reed driving. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She could end it here, disable the truck, throw the convoy into chaos. But she couldn't aim at him, not Reed. Lead in your sight, said in her ear. Calm, professional, take it. Morgan's throat closed. It's him. A pause crackled on the line. Then's voice, low and tense. Morgan, don't freeze now. If you hesitate, they'll make the pass. I can't, she whispered. Then I will. She saw his scope glint faintly in the distance, aimed at the cab. Her pulse spiked. No, stand down. Morgan. I said stand down. Her voice cut sharp, harder than steel. For a heartbeat, silence, then's grudging growl, then do something. The trucks roared closer, seconds left. Morgan shifted aim, not at Reed but at the asphalt. She fired. The round cracked pavement inches before the truck, exploding gravel into the windshield. The vehicle swerved hard, brakes screeching. The second truck slammed into its rear, jackknifing sideways. Bikes scattered, engines revving, curses rising. The convoy skidded into chaos right where she wanted them, under the overpass. Move, Morgan shouted, already scrambling down the ridge. His rifle thundered, precise shots dropping tires, forcing more bikes into the ditch. Dust and smoke swirled as the Vipers scrambled for cover, shouting, firing back wildly. Morgan sprinted low, sliding behind a rusted barrier, bullets pinging off metal. She leaned out, sighted, fired, dropping one gunman, winging another. Her heart was a furnace, not of rage, but of focus. Through the haze, she saw Reed. He'd leapt from the cab, weapon in hand, shouting commands she couldn't hear. To the Vipers, or to her. She couldn't tell. Cargo's voice cut in. They're trying to pull the crates. Morgan swung her rifle toward the rear truck. Two bikers struggled with a crate half open. Inside, she glimpsed the dull gleam of metal, not rifles, not explosives, something smaller, packed in rows of cylindrical cases. Maya's voice gasped over comms. That's not weapons, that's bioagent transport, sealed vials. Morgan's stomach dropped. Biological, not guns, something worse. She fired, splintering the crate lid, forcing the men back. But the knowledge lodged like shrapnel in her gut. Whoever funded this wasn't arming gangs. They were moving poison. Vince appeared through the smoke, shotgun raised, eyes blazing with fury. He spotted her instantly, bellowed like an animal, and charged. Morgan barely ducked as buckshot ripped concrete above her head. She rolled, came up firing, her round sparking his vest and driving him back. But then Reed was there, between them. He shoved aside, shouted something at Morgan. She couldn't hear the words through the ringing in her ears, only saw his face, pleading, furious, desperate. Morgan barked in her ear, he's shielding. Her scope centered on both men, her finger tense on the trigger. Reed, her brother in arms, the monster who had burned, who had brought death into her town. And Reed was standing in front of him. The world slowed. Every memory surged, the firefight in Afghanistan, Reed's hand dragging her from rubble, his laugh in the chow tent, his voice promising I've got your six. And now, his eyes begging her not to shoot. Morgan shouted, take the shot. Her breath hitched, her hands trembled. She fired, but not at Reed. At the ground between them, the bullet spat dust, forcing both men to dive. Chaos erupted again. Bikers screamed orders, rifles snapped, engines roared as some fled with bikes. Morgan scrambled forward, using the smoke and confusion. She reached the second truck, yanked the crate fully open. Inside, the vials shimmered under faint light, labels in languages she didn't recognize. A chill swept her body. If this left Coyote Springs, if it crossed the border, whole cities could burn. She grabbed a thermite charge from her pack, slammed it inside, lit the fuse, and dove clear. The crate burst, fire consuming the vials in a hiss of smoke and shattering glass. The bioagent gone. But the fight was far from over. When the smoke thinned, Reed was gone, too. The convoy shattered, scattered, broken, but not defeated. Morgan crouched, chest heaving, dust coating her face. Dropped beside her, eyes blazing. "You had him, both of them. Why the hell didn't you take the shot?" Her voice cracked, soft but steady. "Because I still don't know the truth." Cursed packing, fists clenched. "The truth is right there, he's with them, and you just let him walk away." Morgan looked at the burning crate, smoke curling into the dawn sky. Her heart felt hollow, shredded, but her conviction only sharpened. "No," she said quietly, "this isn't finished. If Reed's alive, if he's tangled in this, then there's more at stake than us. The ambush, the cover-up, the Vipers, it's all one chain." She turned her gaze east, where the desert swallowed the fleeing bikes. Her voice lowered to a vow. "I'll follow it to the end, and when I find the last link, I'll break it." The sun rose fully, burning gold over the canyon. But in Morgan's chest, only storm clouds gathered. Because Reed Harper was alive. And he was still running. Why do endings always come disguised as beginnings? That was the thought whispering in Morgan's mind as she stood once again in the empty bar of the Mirage, days after the canyon ambush. The Vipers hadn't vanished. They had splintered, regrouped, scattered like smoke in the desert winds. Vince was still out there. Reed too. And the truth, the real truth about the ambush, about the orders, about who had sold them out, still sat in the shadows just out of reach. But something had changed. The cargo had been destroyed, the border safe for now. She poured herself coffee that tasted like ash, sat alone in the silence that once was filled with laughter and jukebox songs, and wondered how many more nights she could live like this, waiting, fighting, bleeding for scraps of truth. Her phone buzzed, a message. "If you want answers, come alone. The cliffs north of Dry River, midnight." No name, but she didn't need one. It was him. Reed Harper. She went without hesitation. The night was clear, stars sharp in the black sky. The desert stretched silent, the cliffs rising like jagged teeth. She left the jeep behind and walked the last mile on foot, pistol at her hip, rifle slung but loose. And then she saw him. Reed stood at the edge of the cliff, moonlight painting his face pale, his beard catching silver. He looked older, harder, but he was still Reed. For a moment she froze. All the words she'd carried, accusations, demands, pleas, died in her throat. He turned, eyes catching hers. "You came." Her voice cracked but steadied. "You asked." They stood a few paces apart, silence stretching, heavy with years and ghosts. Finally Morgan spoke. "Why?" Reed's eyes dropped to the dirt. "Because they never meant for us to come back, not from Afghanistan. We were pawns, Morgan, sent into that valley to die. You, me, all of us." Her chest tightened. "Then why are you alive?" His jaw clenched. "Because they made me choose. My life for the truth buried, found me, dragged me out of that canyon, told me if I wanted to live I'd work for them, carry their secrets, keep their shipments moving, or they'd erase what was left of our team's names, blacken them forever." Morgan's breath shook. "So you stayed all this time?" "I stayed alive," Reed said, voice rough. "And I waited for a chance, for someone who could burn it down, someone they couldn't control." He looked up, eyes sharp now. "That someone is you." Morgan felt the words cut through her like fire and ice both. Anger surged, grief tangled with relief. "You should have told me." His voice broke. "If I had, they'd have killed you too." Her throat burned. "You don't get to decide who dies for me." The wind howled across the cliffs, carrying silence between them. Reed stepped closer. "I never betrayed you, Morgan. I betrayed myself. Every day I played their game, but I left you alive because I knew, when the time came, you'd be the one to finish it." Morgan stared at him. The man she had mourned, cursed, prayed for. Alive, broken, but still standing. Still carrying the weight she thought was hers alone. "You could come back," she whispered. "Testify, tell the truth, help me expose them." Reed shook his head slowly. "You know that won't work. These people don't face trials. They erase trials. They erase witnesses." His hand brushed hers just for a second. Warm, familiar, gone too soon. "I can't come back," he said softly, "but I can point you forward." He slipped a flash drive into her palm, small, cold, heavy with everything it meant. "Names, routes, contracts, proof," he said. "Enough to trace them, enough to make them bleed." Morgan clenched it tight, her chest aching. "And you?" Reed's gaze drifted toward the desert, where faint engine sounds grew louder. Headlights cut across the dark, closing in. "They'll never stop hunting me," he said quietly. "And if you're near me, they'll hunt you harder." Her pulse surged. "Then come with me, now we'll fight together." For a moment she thought he might. That the years might collapse, that the two of them might walk back into light together. But Reed only smiled, faint, weary, soft with sorrow. The kind of smile of a man already walking another road. "No, Morgan, my fight ends here." The headlights swept closer, engines growling like thunder. Vince's men, the Vipers. Reed stepped back toward the cliff's edge. "Your fight just beginning." Her hand shot out, gripping his arm, desperate. "Don't you dare leave me again." His eyes held hers, steady, honest, and full of something she hadn't seen in years. Peace. "I never left you," he whispered. Then he pulled free, turned, and disappeared into the night, running straight toward the roar of engines, drawing them away, fire blooming in the dark where his weapon barked. Morgan stood frozen, tears hot on her cheeks, the flash drive burning in her fist. She wanted to chase him, drag him back, save him like he had once saved her. But deep inside she knew this was his choice, his redemption, his end. By dawn the desert was quiet again, and his men were ghosts chasing Reed into shadows. The town was safe, for now. Morgan drove back to the Mirage alone, the flash drive beside her, heavy with names and truths that would shatter more than her world. She poured coffee at sunrise, sat at the bar and stared out at the quiet street, would open the again, would curse her decisions but stay. Maya would dig into the files, her restless courage pushing forward. And Morgan, she would keep going, because that's what soldiers do when the war never really ends. Her hand brushed the drive, and she whispered into the empty room. "I'll finish it, Reed, I swear." The jukebox clicked on, unasked, as if the old machine knew silence had stretched too long. A soft song filled the room. And Morgan smiled through her tears. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.